Hello guys, Hidrugon here, back here with another Hunter x Hunter chapter review. Now today I'm reviewing chapter 407 of Hunter x Hunter that just officially dropped. So I've got myself quite a bit of notes, and whilst it wasn't a text heavy chapter, there was quite a lot of exposition that was done in a very intriguing way. So I'm going to get to that later on, but to start off with the chapter, we have the big events. Halkenberg's funeral. Now, Halkenberg's funeral is attracting a lot of people. There is a humongous amount of people in the crowds, and we see that the royal soldiers are guarding the coffins, and it's being carried by what you'd assume be very close members to Halkenberg. So already, there's a lot of very interesting things that could happen. First of all, do anyone close to Halkenberg still have any residual Nen abilities? Also, if Haley go and just kill everyone, and of course the royal army is included, would that give Benjamin an excuse to just use martial law? There's a lot of questions here and a lot of possibilities, which for the start of the chapter is very good as it creates some intrigue. And then after this, we've got, of course, this huge staircase which is shown. Now this staircase is very reminiscent of the palace from the, of course, Chimera Antark, and it's very massive in scope. The artwork is absolutely exquisite. It is beautiful, and you see just the scale of how huge the staircase is in comparison to the massive crowd of people. And this does a few things. It shows us just how popular Halkenberg is. It shows us just the scale of this event, and it also contextualizes everything in place. The fact that everyone is around the coffin, so it gives us a bit of a sphere of a mental image of how this whole event looks like, which I thought was very good. This theme of insider knowledge, the stuff us the viewer knows that the characters don't, we can see the full scale and how everything's developed, and also the other characters are limited in their perspective as we get the grand image of things. And this is seen a lot in this arc, where there's lots of different narratives, lots of people trying to play mind games with each other, and the narrator is our sense of truth. So it really helps us stay in line, and not just that, but keep a perspective, and also keep, the grander image, as right after we get this, it expands out to the black whale, and we see we're on day 12. So this immediately contextualizes just how much time and what's been happening when. And we still got a lot of time left, which is very worrying because things have accelerated astonishingly quickly. In fact, we've got 61 days on the black whale if everything goes to plan, and we're already 12 days in and all hell is about to break loose. So that's pretty crazy. So afterwards, we go to the royal army soldiers, the ones we saw beforehand in some chapters where they're trying to establish this friendship among these people. And we see that the member Borans is missing. Now, Borans is the member that has the grudge against the princes, of course, especially the fourth prince. So it's a bit suspicious. The Borans, she's been missing for 30 minutes, and they're all starting to panic. There's a real sense of something wrong has happened here. It's a bit similar to the Phantom Troop in their flashback, when they're really getting the sense of Sarasa should be here. Something's not happening as it should. This is a common thread that Togashi uses, is that everyone's got their own idea of how everything happens, and groups of people have their own mentalities and their own worldview. And the moment something shifts, the immediate reaction is that something bad's happened. It's quite a negative connotation that's just instantly placed on it. They're theorizing, of course, because they're trying to work out what's happened, and they suspect that Haley has kidnapped her. And well, they were completely correct. We get this flash forwards, and we see Borans being abducted and is face to face with the head of Haley, Morena Prudo. And Morena Prudo, of course, has got her Haley members behind her and her Haley members with Borskin. And what's very interesting is that Morena Prudo looks very calm and composed. Now, this is a very important observation because it doesn't stay that way. So afterwards, Borskin is trying to think to herself, how did I get abducted? She doesn't have a memory, so she concludes that there was some kind of Nen ability. And then after that, of course, Morena starts talking to her, and she's, very maybe it's a bit unprofessional to say, she's very cute and funny. You know, she's the type of girl that if I was a 13-year-old boy, I'm 21, so I'm not, but, you know, I'd be like, dang, I might have a crush on her, because she's just so, the charisma she has is really enthralling. You really get to like her. You see her kind of cheeky nature. You see her banter among her and, of course, the Haley members. You can see she's quite the personality. In fact, it's probably the most we've seen of her in her characterization, which is very interesting. And I thought that, you know, it was very, very interesting, the fact that Morena accepted the flaws and everything that was going on. She accepted the unfairness, and she kind of compromised. She said, yeah, it's not ideal, but, you know, we are a bunch of criminals. You know, at least I'm doing you this. Please try to be understanding. Because we learned that Morena is trying to recruit her. So this further adds to the possibility the royal soldiers were saying about Boskin probably being used to kill Cechenich. So this is a very interesting interaction. Lots of subtle nuances. You know, Togashi really shows us the facial expressions at all times of how they're changing. So we get a sense of the atmosphere. Not necessarily so much of how, you know, the plot's developing, but starting to learn more about these characters. And then afterwards, Morena introduces a game. She uses this as a method for compromise. She says, you know, okay, it's not cool what we did, but if you play this game, you'll have a method of escape. Now, this is a yes and no game. In fact, there's 4 cards for no, 1 card for yes. Then afterwards, there's a joker card and an X card. A joker card can transform into a yes or no, and the X card is her only option out of the game to go back like nothing happens. So already, Boskin clicks. She clicks it. This is obviously a trick in the fact that it seems like, as we saw in the Hunter example, the candle, the bigger candle, of course the bigger candle will stay for longer, but no. So she's thinking it's reverse psychology. She thinks it's a trap for Morena. So she's already second guessing herself. And we see this really internal monologue, which allows us to understand Boskin's thinking. And then afterwards, she's asking Morena questions. And she understands that Morena's being honest. In fact, she's trying to analyze Morena based on her responses. And something very interesting happens. After she asks Morena if Morena's cheating, Morena says she's not cheating. And we see a slight shift in the artwork. Her face becomes a bit less blurry and majestic, becomes more detailed. And Boskin realizes, why is she so angry? So this makes us think that there's something about this idea of cheating or this idea of control, either or, that really angers Morena. Because Morena, we've seen she has quite the poker face, and Boskin can immediately understand that something's changed. There's been a shift in the atmosphere. So it makes me think that this could be childhood trauma. It could be the fact she was neglected. The fact, of course, she has that scar and she's the unofficial royal. The fact that she has lived her whole life in the underworld being a sort of shadow of what she could be. Whatever the case is, it really is an interesting piece of foreshadowing that I'm sure Togashi would expand on later. And this is extremely interesting, the game of the rules, because of course Morena and her cards have her own set of rules. I mean, of course they do. It's her that set up the game. It's very interesting because she's using the set of rules to try to do some persuasion. She's there essentially trying to convince Borskins to join her willingly, right? She's saying, if you pick this card, I'll tell you my plans, why you're here, why you got kidnapped. And it was very, intriguing. It was very unorthodox, the fact that information from Morena, which you'd think she's trying to hide, is actually what she's trying to use the game to give. And I thought this whole interaction, right, just in general, the bigger picture, it was Togashi's best use of foreshadowing and of exposition I've seen. I'll start off with the exposition, right? For the exposition, this was absolutely masterful because in the end, right, from a base level when you're reading it, it comes off as a friendly, charming character interaction where they're playing a game and they're thinking things to themselves, and it's like it reads very smoothly. But in fact, no, this is an exposition dump, but instead of having walls of text, Tagashi's gotten creative. He's gotten extremely creative, in fact, because what he's doing is that he's using this as a vehicle to understand Boskin's thinking patterns, Morena's personality, in fact, giving hints at Morena's plans based on what she's trying to do. And of course, we're seeing Boskin's goals, and it's an expedition dump, which is, very, very subtle. Normally, Tagashi is extravagant, you can tell it's exposition, but here, the exposition, the plot threads go one in one. And the saying, show don't tell, it's actually doing both at the same time. It's not telling and it's showing. So it's extremely masterful. And if it wasn't done the way it is with, of course, Morena's charming, personality or charisma, of course, of Boskin's, analytical thinking, that conflict, that contrast makes this easier to read. Though, of course, the saying opposites attract. So Tagashi is making use of these characters' personality to sneak in as much as he can get. And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. And yeah, of course, I thought that, the fact that, of course, this doubles as a way we can learn about both these characters was very well, what's the word? It was slipped in very, very nicely, because lots of the sentences here kill two birds with one stone. We get the exposition, which also doubles as characterization. So in the end, we get to learn more about these characters, whilst also learning about the objectives, learning about the world building and the basic history. And we get lots of course, foreshadowing, which is the main second thing, which I was going to get into. Foreshadowing here shows that there is a lot of setups, right, placed about Morena's character and about Boskin's character. But I'm going to focus on Morena because she's a much bigger player, it seems like, at the moment. There was a lot of subtle changes in Morena's demeanor, especially her anger. And I think that this will be one of those moments where we go further on into this arc and we can look back and go, that was the moment we started noticing this pattern within her. We can see this, of course, in the Chimera Ant arc, where Meruem starts to interact with Komugi, and you see the basic level of respect he's starting to gain for her. So I think something very interesting is playing on, and I think that the further and further we get into the story, the more and more this chapter is going to really gain value. It's much like a stock where all the things that's set up in this chapter are going to have big payoffs, and when we look back in this chapter later on, I think we're going to have a fonder memory of it. So my rating obviously is going to be biased against it due to the fact that, of course, this is just a setup chapter essentially, right? So after that, we get to see that, of course, Boskin, decides that she's trying to throw Morena off, anything to try to get out of Morena's predictability, what she could have seen possible. Now that we've established it's a fair game, Boskin's trying to win. So she asks Morena, could you pick the cards which are down for me to choose? And this is very interesting. I wonder what her plan is. Maybe she's trying to do it in the order so that she can access the graveyard faster than normal. I'm not too sure. But it's very good because Morena instantly clicks in. She says, I've had this situation before. And that means that this is a very commonly used trick. And it means it's most likely something that's linked to Morena's personality, which I already sort of deducted, but this was confirmation, and more so confirmation, this was a fact that, in fact, is a pastime that Morena very much enjoys. And we see that Morena is very willing, and the chapter ends with the game beginning. But the thing that's very interesting about this is we get an insight into Morena's, thought process. We start to hear Morena's thoughts, which I thought was great, because there was a juxtaposition to Boskin's thoughts where she's trying to figure out how to win, and Morena really doesn't care how this goes. This is essentially for her a screening process, a job interview. She's trying to see how Boskin's personality fits into Hele. Does she react well to these conditions? Is she honest? She's thinking, could she play a good role in regards to the other members? And of course, she's aware of the interactions between the members behind. I think that's why all the other members are there, is to see how she fits. It's essentially a job interview, like, hey, we want you in Haley, but we've got to make sure you're actually someone we can rely on. And I think that Borskin's passing with flying colors right now. Of course she is. I mean, she's an honest person. She's someone that has big goals. And she's just trying to get out of this alive. She can definitely feel the mental pressure and the urgency of the situation she's in. Of course, she's already got that subconscious, how would I say it, the subconscious fear knowing that she's already been drugged to some sort by Nen, where she's been kidnapped and she doesn't know how or when that happened or just anything. So she's extremely vulnerable, which means her back's against the wall, and we're seeing this as her primal response. And I think this is what Morena's doing, is because through someone's primal response, you can tell a lot about them. Of course, you've got this quote by Gon early on in the series saying, if you want to learn about someone, find out what makes them angry. And this is exactly Morena's testing out. And in fact, the irony is that Morena's test has revealed more about her than it did about Borskin's. It's had the opposite effect, because in fact, even the idea of her being considered a cheater seems to anger her to the point that she completely loses the plot. You can tell mentally she's feeling like a psycho because of just how much the background behind her is emphasized. Togashi uses lots of these subtle techniques to make sure that we get to see how the characters are in a spiritual sense based on what's around them. We saw this a lot in the Chimera Ant talk, where in fact Togashi was using musical notes to tell us, almost in some Morse code, what everyone was thinking and feeling, and we could decipher it. And in this arc, it's very much the backgrounds. So I think that Togashi's always very unique with the ways he finds to tie things together, but also change it up to keep it refreshing. Hunter x Hunter is like this ice cream that's constantly changing flavor, but it's still an ice cream, right? Maybe it might even change consistency. A bit of a weird analogy, but I just want to show my appreciation for Togashi's writing. So that being said, to conclude, I think this chapter advances the story substantially. I think it's a very substantial chapter. I don't think we can see it yet, but I predict and I deduct that it will be in the future. But I can't give points for what ifs, right? I have to just look at this as a chapter individually. And individually, when I look at this chapter, I think it's the weakest chapter we've had in the last 23 to 30 chapters. It's a bit hard to deduct exactly where it stands from the 380 to the 390 mark, but I think it is one of the weaker ones, and definitely the weakest in the newest batch. But by being the weakest, it doesn't mean it's bad by any means. In fact, it's really good. It's very good. I'll give this chapter a 7 out of 10. Now, this is very high. I might not seem high, but me as a reviewer, right, I believe 6 out of 10 is pretty good. I'm not one of these people that, they give 5 out of 10, 4 out of 10 to something that's bad. No, for me, if something's bad, I give it a 1 out of 10. Genuinely, a 1 out of 10, or perhaps sometimes even a 0 out of 10, depending on how bad the execution is. But I thought that this chapter could have been bad, but the execution was masterful, so it makes it great. So a 7 out of 10 feels a bit harsh, but I don't believe in points, right? Because if you do 7 point, it kind of adds to the point of leniency, right? We've all got this internal bias within us, and for me, when I regulate it to whole numbers and I give myself a set metric to follow, it eliminates a lot of my bias. So I'm very happy with this rating. I think that this chapter is splendid, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. I must say I have a little disappointment that we didn't go back to what's happening with Crollo, but that's what to be expected. Togashi likes to give us curveballs, and we don't really understand it until later on. So yes, I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope I've maybe enriched some of your thoughts in the chapter, maybe, balanced some concepts which otherwise weren't really at the forefront. And yes, if you want to see more videos like this, I do Hunter x Hunter videos every single day on this channel, so please subscribe if you're interested. I take in all suggestions in the request. All the suggestions people have suggested, I'm doing them one by one, so if you want to add to the list, please feel free and go ahead. And I hope you've all had an incredible day. Hope you all stay safe. And yes, I'm wishing you all the very best. And I love you all, Hunter x Hunter family. This was Hadrigon. Peace out.